Well, right now, I'm really excited that you guys get to hear from someone pretty special right now. Our keynote speaker for the afternoon, because although he is extremely well traveled, he has chosen McLennan County to put down roots, and he's about to tell you why. Sherman Ayres has a broad background in corporate management, spanning a career of over 30 years with Mars Incorporated. He served as quality assurance manager, operations manager, and plant manager of sites in Columbus, Ohio, Vernon, California, Albany, Georgia, and right here in Waco, Texas. Corporate management led to extensive travel across Canada, Mexico, Europe, Japan, and Russia, creating a diverse understanding of the global business community. Upon retirement, he founded S.R. Ayres and Associates, a business consultancy. Mr. Ayres currently serves on the boards of Alliance Bank Central Texas, Startup Waco, the Steward Board of St. Luke A&E Church, and is the board chair of the Waco Foundation. We are so fortunate that Sherman chooses to make the Waco area his home still as he resides with his wife Josette in Lorena. Please join me in welcoming Sherman to the stage today. Another right-sized guy over here.
Good afternoon. First, let me thank Wendy and her team and the board for inviting me to speak with you today. It's been mentioned, for any organization to carry on for 100 years is quite an achievement. So thank you for carrying on that great legacy of the United Way. Now, if you predicted that I will speak on the topic of the role of the nonprofit in our community, you will have been absolutely correct. Because the fact is, when you peel away this beautiful environment and this wonderful lunch that we've been sharing, that's the reason why we're all here. As I was preparing to speak to you, I kept returning to the words said to me by one of my dearest friends, who essentially said, to paraphrase, speaking about the role of nonprofit is, of course, expected and rightly so. However, how you came to the world of the nonprofit is equally important and interesting story that people would like to enjoy hearing as well. After I thought about that, it occurred to me that the majority of the people in this room have probably forgotten more about the nonprofit world than I may ever know. So with that as a backdrop, before I share the words that address the predictable parts of what I'll speak to regarding the nonprofit world, I'm going to step out on faith and first share with you just how it came to be that I'm standing before you here at all. As the side, I can assure you that me walking up here with this big notebook does not mean that I will be speaking for long. It simply means that I know when I have a lot to say, it is best that I stick to a script. And I promise, regardless of how it appears, I'm going to get back to the part about the nonprofit. But first, let's take a little journey. It was October of 1972, and I was working in Zanesville, Ohio, at Moore's Building Supply, the early version of Home Depot or Lowe's. Minimum wage was $1.99, but I was in the management trainee program, so I was making a whopping $2.10 an hour. My brother was visiting one weekend from Columbus, Ohio. He worked for Ohio Bureau of Employment Services, and he shared that a dog food plant, we didn't call it pet food back then, we didn't get that sophisticated. And Columbus, Ohio was hiring, and they were starting out hourly workers at over $4 an hour. I was very impressed. So much so that 2 months later, on December 4th, 1972, as a 19-year-old string bean of a young man, I walked through the doors of Cal-Can Pet Foods, today known as Pedigree, having no idea that I had joined the pet food division of Mars Incorporated, a global family-owned business, nor that it would be one of the most impactful decisions of my life. I began as an hourly social worker, rotating shifts as a shipping and receiving clerk. After roughly 2 years, I moved into R&D as a quality control inspector and began advancing to increasingly greater levels of responsibility. My first managerial job was meat inspector. Love that job. Each morning I put on my uniform, I slid a thermometer on the one hip, a 9-inch boning knife on the other. I put quality good tags in one pocket, quality bad tags in the other pocket, and headed out to the meat aisle. No meat got unloaded until I blessed it. As you can imagine, I was a very popular guy with truck drivers. I remained in the quality area for 22 years, ultimately becoming the department manager before relocating in 1994 to the Calcan plant in Southern California as operations manager. 9 years later, after plant manager assignments in Albany, Georgia, and here in Waco, Texas, in the confectionery division of Mars, I retired after completing 31 years of service. This isn't in my notes, but I can assure you that taste testing in the confectionery plant was a lot more fun than the I took to retirement like a duck to water. As it turned out, my Mars journey was not quite over. In 2010, I was asked to return as a consultant charged with accelerating the learning curve of new plant managers into the Mars culture. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. In that capacity, I worked with most of the plants in North America until 2019 when I retired again, I think. And that aside from a few dips and turns along the way, recaps how it is that I'm standing here before you this afternoon. I've come to believe and flatter myself that my personal life journey is pretty doggone amazing, particularly if you knew the first 19 years that I didn't cover. Humble, meager beginnings, to say the least. That said, I believe an equally interesting and important aspect of my life's journey is the fact of how I got, not how I got to wake up, but that I stayed. Why did I stay? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I knew three things, only three things when I took the assignment to come to Waco. One was that I'd heard the name Waco in some of my favorite old cowboy movies. Two, I knew about the tragedy at the Branch Davidian compound. And three, I knew as soon as I retired, to quote another old cowboy adage, that I was going to be on the first train out of Dodge. But then something strange happened. When it came time to leave, and knowing I can move anywhere, and that's anywhere with a capital A anywhere, my wife and I couldn't come up with any good reason to do so. In fact, as we made an actual list of pros and cons, it wasn't even close. But why? Was it because we loved the weather? Well, growing up in Ohio, I can tell you, yeah, that was in the plus column. Because we loved our church family? Yes. What about the cost of living? Of course. Friends made? For sure. Was it the bass fishing? Absolutely double yes. All these things are true. Though to paint a clearer picture at this point, I must digress just a little bit. My father was a minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, usually abbreviated to be called the AME Church, which is frequently known for moving pastors. I grew up living in parsonages. By the time I got to Mars Incorporated, I had moved 4 times and went to 8 different public schools. Once with Mars, I moved 4 more times. I say it jokingly, but I think left to my own devices, I could be a hermit. But I began to understand the unintended consequences that result from a nomadic life where the dust never quite settles. Like those snow domes that you shake with the snow in them. Every time my dust started to settle, somebody picked me up and gave me another good shake. That was my life before settling down in Waco. Now back to explaining why and closing in on the world of the nonprofit. Once the decision was made to stay, my wife occasionally, and I use that word occasionally very intentionally because she was way too smart to hug me too often, would say something like, you know, you have too much to offer to stay on the sidelines. You should think about how you can contribute and give back and get more involved in the community. And remember, I spent my entire life in the for-profit world. In fact, I don't think I ever said the word non and profit in the same sentence before I retired. But this feeling kept gnawing at me. And I began to see how people went about giving back. How people actually strengthen their communities, help their neighbors. Suddenly I started seeing all the good that is directly linked to the nonprofit world and organizations like the United Way. I started feeling not only the need to get involved, but the responsibility to do so as well. I started thinking about just what do I have to contribute? How can I be an asset to the community? And that's been what I've been struggling with all along hit me. I have never stayed anywhere long enough to really understand or be part of this thing we call community, much less understand the role of the nonprofit in the community. That's when I had my breakthrough moment and realized and understood the draw of why I stayed in Waco and couldn't leave. And it's sitting right in this room, and I can assure you, Jackson and I did not have a conversation before I say this. Collectively, you are the reason that I stayed in Waco. And who are you? You are the nonprofit sector. And in my humble opinion, the heart of this community. So as you all know, to me, Waco is like the little engine that could. And you, my friends, are the engine. My first involvement with the nonprofit community came when I accepted a consultancy capacity and interim leadership position at community and schools. I was suddenly managing a group of individuals who were doing their jobs for an entirely different reason and perspective than I had ever experienced. Now, I must tell you, going from managing in a global for-profit business to a nonprofit was like getting thrown in the deep end of the pool. Those employees weren't there led by monetary or personal prestige. They were there because in this great big thing we call the human experience, some people just have the heart to serve others, to help their neighbors, to help someone other than themselves, despite the fact that it often isn't rewarded as lucratively as many other career choices. That's merely one example of the spirit of nonprofit work. The same could be said for the United Way, and I'm sure suspect most every other organization represented in this room. Because it's the simple fact that we don't do these things for profit that makes it all the more special. One of my favorite quotes by the late legendary football coach Vince Lombardi, and I think with a little imagination, it applies to this room and occasion. He said, "We will chase perfection and we will chase it relentlessly, knowing all the while we could never attain it. But along the way, we shall catch excellence." Everyone in this room knows that regardless of how much we give of ourselves, we can never make our community perfect. But with the spirit to continue to strive toward perfection, the best way we know how, and in this case, by supporting the United Way or any of the many other extraordinary nonprofits represented here today, we can achieve the excellence that we seek in our community. If you are in attendance and as a guest and not involved in the nonprofit community, you owe it to yourself to give it a good hard look. And supporting the United Way wouldn't be a bad place to start. I can assure you, if a Rolling Stone like myself can find a place in the nonprofit world, you can too. So I'd like to conclude my remarks with a rousing thank you to United Way specifically, and to every other entity and individual in this room for the work you have done and continue to do to support the nonprofits of the greater Waco community and McLennan County. With people like you that love this community and have such a philanthropic spirit, I believe the sky's the limit for Waco, and I'm proud to call it my home. Thank you.